on my feet, stomping out the negativity. Everybody not a friend of me, spread the love, still I move deliberately. Bully face on, but the smile be heavenly. Brooklyn girls, so they love the energy, love sincerity. So I take the liberty to take them on a journey lyrically, through hallways and alleys.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of The Next Chapter, where we discuss shades of gray. I am one of your hosts, Miss Kitty Rose, Minister Cat, and I am joined by the lovely, did I do it right this
Melissa
week?
D. Every week.
Hi Mama, how are you today?
Oh, I'm exhausted. I found 2 puppies abandoned in a parking lot this weekend.
And I've been seeing your social media posting in regards to looking for a new home for them, but I think they have found their new home.
Oh, they have not. And
they look so well adjusted.
Feelings about being a mother. I can't be a mother. I can't be a mother to puppies. I can't be a mother to humans.
Well, you have a cat.
That takes care of itself.
Well, he does. He really does. But those 2 puppies, they look like they home. So I don't know if you're going to be successful with that. But let's get into it, your exhausted ass. Let's get into this week's chapter of The Next Chapter. And this week's topic of the week is an interesting one because you actually brought this to my attention. And when I talked to one of my other counterparts about it, they were like, "What's that?" So this week's topic is an interesting one. We are discussing, what are we discussing this week?
Adultification bias.
Girl, bye. What is that? Well, we're going to go into what's that. But what made you select that? Because like I said, I just spoke to one of my counterparts who's a black woman, educated black woman, older educated black woman, and I said, wow, today's topic is going to be adultification. And she said, what's that? And my first response to you when you sent me the video was, what's that? So what made you, because it's a very, very interesting topic, and it's a topic that definitely does plague society, in particularly the black race. But what made you pick that video and want to discuss that topic this week?
You know, I do think it's interesting that I keep on finding these topics that really touch on the difference of race. And, you know, there are things that you don't typically think about. And then I come across it. And it's interesting that, you know, these are things that you've discussed before. But this is one of those topics that during our research for a previous episode, I had looked up when we were talking about self-care, the difference between self-care for black women versus white women. And this adultification video had come up, and it discussed how society adultifies black girls more than they do other races. And when I think back about to my childhood, there is that tone of black girls are treated as adult women much sooner than white women. And it's interesting that it's just accepted. It's just a part of what we do as a society.
And I didn't even realize that we did that until actually doing the research for this show this week. Before we go to the first video that you brought to my attention, FYI, I am the oldest of 3 children. And I really believe my earliest memories, because I was also a latchkey kid, was taking care of my siblings who were literally right underneath me, 10 months and 2 years. Literally remember taking care of them as early as 8, 9 years old. So it's interesting the dynamics of what this title or what this theme means. Let's go into the explanation of what adultification actually means. You guys can go to the video.
In the United States, adults view black girls as less innocent and more adult-like than their white peers starting as young as 5 years old. This is known as adultification bias. A groundbreaking study by Georgetown Law Center on poverty and inequality found that adults believe black girls need less nurturing, less protection, less support, and less comforting. And related studies show that black girls are punished at a disproportionate rate in schools and the juvenile justice system. These statistics reveal an alarming reality. But do they reflect the experiences of black girls and women? We conducted focus groups across the country to hear about their lived experiences. They told us that black girls often face higher standards.
I feel like you cannot make mistakes as a black girl.
All kids make mistakes, but in similar situations, black girls are treated differently. A white girl's mistakes might be met with sympathy and understanding. But time after time, black girls are punished instead because they are held to a more adult standard of behavior.
So very interesting. So, Kitty, when you watched it, kind of feel like, oh, yeah, yes, this is something that I've witnessed.
It's something I've witnessed, and it's something that I have been a part of. And I don't know if our community or society as a whole is aware that we're doing this, or that society is doing this, because, you know, it wasn't something that I thought about that actually happens. But when I saw the video, I was like, oh my God, that happens to every single sister that I know. And when I thought about that it happens to almost every single black woman that I know, I was curious that did that happen to you as a white woman growing up? Did you feel that you got less, or you got more nurturing in regards to being a woman, being a lady? Did you feel like you were protected? Did you feel like you got support? Because I know that sometimes as a black woman, I definitely don't feel that we have the support or get nurtured. I feel like we get told that we could handle it. We get this title or this stigma that black women are strong women. And we're actually, as of like, I think last year, 2021, we started taking on that title and saying, I don't want that. Stop calling me this strong black woman. Like, stop putting this title on me that's actually too heavy to bear. So before going all over the place, again, where did you feel looking at that video as a white woman and remembering how you were raised or grew up?
Well, I think that I came from a different background because I was an only child.
Okay.
And my mother was the only parent in the household. So I think that I grew up with a different dynamic because of that. But out in the world, I remember being 16, being, you know, seen as more of an adult, people mistaking me as more as an older adult, but definitely not when I was 5 or 11 years old. It wasn't assumed that I was strong enough. I definitely could make mistakes. You know, it wasn't a fear, like I couldn't make a mistake after I made the first one. It was just accepted like, oh, it's a learning curve, you know? So I definitely feel like we've had different experiences in that realm. And just like being a witness to what's going on around me younger, I think that I did feel that black girls were stronger, right? That they could take care of themselves. Like, don't mess with them because they will fuck you up.
It's so funny, but not funny. I hope I have enough time to share this quick little story. When I was producing Natural Sessions, I had an episode where I had a young sister. Her name is Gigi. Gigi, I forget Gigi's last name, Blanker, and she now works with the Rikers prison system up here in New York. But one of the reasons why she works for the prison system is because she's a white girl who grew up in a poor white community, almost like, I guess what you would say was like trailer trash. So she didn't have the best home life. So she would purposely get into trouble so that she can go to the group home where she felt more comfortable. And do you know that when she would go before the judge, and she would be like in the courtroom with a black girl and a Spanish girl, how the judge would say to her, send her home, and then put the black girl and the Spanish girl, send them to the group home when they would do either the same crime or more offensive crime, but they felt like, well, you're white and you'll be okay, so you can go home, not realizing that her home was so bad that she purposely wanted to get into trouble to go to the group home. So it's so funny how the system felt like, well, she was okay to handle whatever was going on, but the black girls and the Spanish girls were more of a threat to society, that they needed to be locked up. So I feel like, is that almost like in the connection to making us feel more of an adult than it's time to? You know, like I told you earlier, I remember being as small as, 8, 7, 9 years old, catering to my brothers and my parents and everyone in my village seemed like it was okay. Like, Shalisa can handle that. Let her do it. And it trickled down to my adulthood, where I think it caused conflicts between me and my mother, because it was always like, well, Sha has it. Sha can handle it. Sha raised them boys. And it's like, but that's nothing to glorify. That's nothing to give me praise, that I was at home at 9, 10 years old, 11 years old, taking care of my siblings, that I'm only a year older than. But I think that because people would throw that to my mother or in her face, even though she set it up that way, I think there was a level of resentment. And it was almost like there's two women in the house when there really isn't. There's the one woman who's the mother, and then there's a child who happens to be her daughter, but who's the oldest and got the responsibility of, well, you could take care of the house, you could take care of the kids, because I'm at work. And I felt like that stigma kept getting repeated, probably in my own mother's household and my grandmother's household, where, you go out in the fields and then come home and you take care of the kids. And the only thing that the men do was go out in the fields. And not that that's the only thing, but because now you're in the fields and coming home to cook and clean, the mama needs help. And who she's going to ask the help from? But from her daughter, not from her son. So now you have us as early again as 8, 9, 7 years old cooking, because we're assisting our mothers in the household. And then we end up doing the same thing to our daughters subconsciously, because I really believe that it's happening subconsciously because of what government or society has put upon us. Then now we've just carried that torch without realizing that we're carrying that torch and repeating the behavior of allowing little girls to be more adult quicker or faster than they should. I don't know.
And I have to say, I wasn't even allowed to touch the stove, until I was like 13.
Girl, bye.
I still don't know how to cook today.
I was teaching my daughter how to make breakfast at 6.
Yeah, no, I mean, if it didn't go in a toaster, out of luck.
And I'm proud of that. Yes, my daughter can cook at 6. And now I'm thinking about it like, oh my God, what was I doing to her at 6 o'clock? What kind of pressures? But I did teach my sons also. But I don't know if I taught them the way that I taught my daughter. So it's interesting how subconsciously we repeat these patterns. And then it's so funny because when I was like 13, I got frozen chicken thrown in my face because my mother thought I was back talking her, but she had already set me up to talk to her like an adult. Like, we almost had the same plan. Like, I'm thinking, what do you mean I'm being disrespectful? But I think I questioned her, or I think I back talked her, you know what I'm saying? And she threw some chicken at me that hit me across the face. I still remember it to this day. But I always felt like you played a part in me being disrespectful because you didn't check me at 10. You didn't check me at 11. How dare you check me already at 13 when you've been allowing an adult behavior from the time I was 9, 10 years old?
So it does cause a lot of confusion, right?
It does.
And then it comes into this over-sexualization too, where you have young girls being exposed to sexual advances at such a young age. And, they're put into dangerous situations. And what does a young girl know to do in those situations? Like, we put them there, but we don't teach them how to handle. And it's a shame that we're having to teach our children how to handle these situations when they shouldn't even need to have to know what sex is at 10 years old. But they're being over-sexualized at such a young age that we have to start preparing them to be like, all right, this is what this means, and this is how you protect yourself. And, it's about educating our girls to have to deal with this society that we created to over-sexualize them.
On that note, let's check out our PSAs.
How prepared is your family if disaster shows up at your doorstep? You can't just turn away a natural disaster. That's why it's important to go to ready.gov/plan before they show up. It has the tools and tips you need to make an emergency plan with your family. So if disaster comes knocking,
Let's go.
you'll be ready to help keep your family safe.
It's just a pizza.
Yes.
Make a plan today.
Every day.
Millions of people are connecting
And even though we're overcoming obstacles,
watching each other's backs,
and banding together.
we should still make an effort.
We should still make an
to
effort.
get to know each other,
on a deeper level.
Father,
cosplayer,
Mentor.
actor.
it's time we take a step forward
It's time we take a step forward.
Come together.
and discover
How accepting our differences
can make us stronger.
So you brought up a really valid point in regards to the sex part, you know, and introducing sex to our young people too early where they can't even understand or comprehend because of the way that we have them even looking or dressed or the type of responsibility that we give them at a young age. But before we talk about that component, I think going back to the comment that I made about, you know, when I talked back to my mother, not realizing that I was doing that, what it allowed me to do is that as an adult parent, you know, of children now and a girl, you know, it made me recognize how I really wanted my daughter to stay a little girl as young as she could, because this culture of adultification doesn't just happen within the Black community. It may not happen within the Caucasian community, but I noticed that even growing up in today's society, my daughter was the youngest. My daughter wasn't the youngest in her crew, but my daughter always looked her age up until 18 years old. You know, from 15 to 6, no, I remember, when do they graduate elementary school? They graduate elementary school, I guess, around like 10, 12, 13, and we were at the prom, and her counterpart and her friends were all like made up, you know, prom, like gown, dresses, bouffant hair, and these young girls were Spanish. These young girls was Dominican and Puerto Rican, and they had, you know, their daughters all dressed up, all made up already. And then, you know, growing up, watching my daughter, you know, didn't do a perm. My daughter just started wearing braids. So my daughter, for the longest part, had her natural hair, a part down the middle, a little bob cut. She didn't wear makeup. She wasn't allowed. Let me say that. She wasn't allowed to wear makeup. She wasn't allowed to go out. You know, she was allowed to be a little girl. And she hated it because all of her friends, they didn't have curfews. Her girlfriends were wearing lashes. They was getting their nails done. But I felt like you need to look like a little girl so I can treat you like a little girl, because as soon as you start looking like an adult, I don't want you feeling yourself to ever feel like you could talk back to me or think that we're on the same level. Because I remember that incident when my mother threw the chicken at me, telling me that I was disrespectful. So I never wanted to put my children in a position for them to be disrespectful by allowing them to think that they had more of a right of a say-so in a household that was not a democracy. I always told them that my household was a dictatorship. So I think that for me, you know, seeing and watching how fast society puts the pressures on young girls to be young women and thinking that's cute, I wanted to make it my business to allow my daughter to be as young as possible, as long as possible. But I think that I didn't realize that subconsciously I was doing that because of what society does to us as a race. Like in the first video when they mentioned she feels like as a Black girl, she can't get a break. And I think that we had that discussion how, you know, Black women are at the bottom of the totem pole. Now Black trans women are at the bottom of the totem pole, where we always feel like we are in competition with everyone else. We got to compete with our men. We got to compete with other women. So I think subconsciously the elders are preparing young people to take on that responsibility at a young age in the nurturing component. But once we get nurtured to prepare ourselves or to protect ourselves, then we kind of just get like left. Because it's like, okay, well now you know and you have those tools, but yet I'm still 10 years old or 13. What do I really know at 13 when I'm still developing what's going on within my own body? I just started my cycle. And now and that was the other part. Once you start your cycle, flow comes, and you can start having children, now you're a woman. No, I'm not a woman. But that was the
13.
first thing that was told. When I started my cycle, now you're a woman.
Mm-hmm.
How am I a woman?
And it makes me think about, you know, what are we losing too by making our girls grow up so fast? Like, we're not allowing them to have that experience of trial and error with friends and creating friendships and, you know, being able to identify their feelings and how to deal with their feelings. We're teaching them to, like, you know, pull up your panties and you be a big girl now, and you know, be that woman. And, you know, we're really stealing a lot from these kids about, you know, their childhood. And I think I love what you're saying about how you let your daughter be, you know, her age all the way up growing, and not letting her wear the makeup so that looks like an adult when she's a child. You know, I think that is really great. And creating those boundaries of, like, this is my role and this is your role. I am the parent, you're the child, and that's how it is. There's no confusion in what that is. And I think that's great. It would be interesting to see what your daughter thought of that.
We need to have her on the show. Let's go to the second video and see if we as Black people play a part in adding to this stereotype or this problem.
I will say that there's a social angle to this, and people will not like what I say when I say this, but we often glorify videos of little girls and babies dancing in frankly sexualized ways because it's cute. But it's not cute, and we're teaching girls about using their bodies.
So it's more cultural.
I think there's a cultural angle to it. It's not entirely that.
White
but
girls
I do think
do that kind of stuff.
They do, but somehow it gets more attached to Black girls, maybe because of the body shapes and body types that tend to develop maybe a little bit more. So I think there's a role for us as parents to really be careful about what we consider cute and put out on social media. You know, I think there's a role for parents in this.
There's a big problem across the board of sexualizing of little girls. But I think what's so interesting about this study is because a lot of this came up during the whole R. Kelly scandal. They were saying that the reason he didn't get prosecuted sooner or he wasn't behind bars sooner is because he was doing this with so many underage Black girls, and that they weren't viewed with the same kind of sympathy.
But if you look at some...
So, dun, dun, dun. And just on that R. Kelly, because I until you said it, I wasn't actually going to mention it, but I think that happens not just in those type of situations, because we have Jerry Lewis, we have Elvis Presley, you know what I'm saying, who are predators on young women. But I think the problem goes back to the parenting, you know what I'm saying? Because the parents of those children, you know what I'm saying, are allowing these things to happen because this person is a celebrity or they can get money. Because it takes us even back to, you know, the olden days, or the golden days, where people use their daughters as property. You know, your daughter is 10 years old and she's already, you know, promised to marry someone. Your daughter's 13 years old and she has to prepare her wedding night to sleep with a stranger, you know what I'm saying, using as commodity. But I think what happened earlier in the video when it talked about body development, you know, one of the other reasons why I had to be mindful about my daughter and keeping her looking like a little girl is because once she started to develop body, you know, her body didn't necessarily match her face. So it was important that since her body was developing, that at least let me keep her face and the way she wore her hair still young, but not just her appearance, also in how I treated her and how I let her treat me. You know what I'm saying? Like, it gets to a point that I think sometimes parents, you know, are in this work mode type of situation. Black parents, you know, we're constantly on the grind. We're constantly working. We're constantly tired. So in that tiredness, you know, we kind of give the responsibilities of, you know, certain things or certain tasks in the household to our daughters, more to our daughters than our sons, unless we just have sons. And then if we only have sons, we still end up not giving them those responsibilities. My mother-in-law has 2 sons. I do not think that she raised her sons to be prepared to take care of the house, to cook. My husband, not towards the end of our marriage, ever cooked a meal. But I remember learning how to cook as early as 10 years old, when in the same household, my brothers weren't getting taught how to cook. My brothers were not getting taught how to clean house. Now, they eventually did learn these things because as an older sibling, I wasn't going to do everything because I just had that kind of attitude, like, little boy, you better come up here and help me. But it was just interesting how even to this day, you know, I'm on the phone with my brother and I'm asking all of the questions. How you doing? How's the kids? How's life? And all he asked me was, how's my boyfriend? Didn't ask me nothing about my life, because I feel like women we get put in this place that we're so strong that we never have to get taken care of. And that happens as early as being a young person, that it ends up trickling down to adults. So we had these two videos. We had these two different definitions. What do you feel like? What do you feel like is what we can give back to our audience in regards to, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? How do we stop it? Can we stop it? Since it's still going on in 2022, what do we do to change that bias and allow children to be children, especially our girls?
I think one of the first thing is just calling it out first, right? Just bringing awareness to it, because a lot of people don't have this awareness. And like you had said, we make pretend that it's cute. Like, oh, look at her. She's a little cute cheerleader with a short skirt, and like, you know, it's like a toddler. But, you know, we need to make sure that we are keeping our kids safe and not making them adults before they're supposed to be adults, and really giving them space to have that ability to grow and to develop those skills of being a kid, because being a well-adjusted child helps you become a well-adjusted adult. Right. And I think that, you know, just calling it out sometimes, or just saying, you know, to a friend, like, hey, she's still 13. She doesn't need to be doing that, you know, and just kind of, you know, supporting each other and supporting our young kids of, you know, letting them experience life naturally and not trying to force this onto them.
I love that.
And not letting other people over-sexualize our children, or even sexualize our children. Not even over-sexualize, just sexualize. Period. Even like ads for American Apparel, very sexualized, geared towards, you know, young adolescents. So we really need to start pointing those out, be like, no, this is not okay.
This is not okay. And I love how you said giving them space to grow, because I'm gonna tell you, we are adults a lot more and a lot longer than we are children. So allow these children to be children, and really take it off the black race. Take it off of the Spanish race. Take it.
I love our audience.
You know, take it off of the black race. Take it off of I think it's the urban communities, you know, because like you said, you wasn't faced with those issues. And I see it too often within our communities. So yeah, let us allow these children, because I'm telling you, it works better. I only had to hem my daughter up one time when she got outside.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? All right, we ain't got that much time. She talked out of her face one time. I choked that girl up, and I put her up off the floor. And I never had to do that. I think Isha had one punishment, one choke up, and one grounding. That's all I ever had.
Wow.
And on that note, we are the next chapter, where we discuss shades of gray, and we'll be back next week. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Minister Kat, aka Kitty Rose, and I am joined by
Melissa D.
All right, guys, we are the next chapter. Mwah.